So I was quite lucky that when we went to school, it was a city technology college, which were relatively new at the time. And so we had computers galore. It was only 3 years old as a school when I went. And because it was supposed to accommodate for post-16 kids too, that meant that there were only 3 years of pupils for an 8-year of pupil school. So we literally had the run of the school, and it was great. I'd never seen so many computers in my life, and I know that my cousin, who didn't go to that school but went to the other traditional comprehensive school, wouldn't have had the same opportunities as I did. And so that was great to sort of start with. And then I kind of was a good student at school. I did well in my GCSEs, and arguably, I think my teachers thought I was going to go far, just because of where I was. But I realised when I went to college that actually what happens is that you can be a big fish in a small pond. And I didn't realise at the time, but I was a very big fish in a small pond. And when my pond was made bigger, I started to struggle, just because I was good at French, for example. I got a B in my GCSEs, and decided that that was a subject I wanted to take at A-level. And then it was only when I was in my A-level French class that I kind of realised that I didn't know what the teacher was saying. And when you have to look at other people to see what they're doing, you kind of go, yeah, this isn't for me. So I'd started working throughout my GCSEs at the Odeon Cinema. And so it felt natural that film studies would be a quick choice, a quick change in terms of getting my 4 A-levels that I needed at the time. And that was interesting. And I decided that after I'd finished college, and I did all right, I didn't complete my my film studies A-level, as you can imagine, because I started it in my second year. So I never really had any intention of finishing it, but just needed to kind of do it so that I wasn't kicked off the course. But I had no intentions of going to university. It wasn't something that anyone in my immediate family had done. That wasn't the case for my stepdad. My stepdad had come from a place. He'd gone to Oxford as just as natural course for him, and the rest of his family, it was the thing to do. Whereas no one in my family had ever spoken about university, what that meant, and so it wasn't anything that I wanted to do. It wasn't anything I aspired to. So I got a job again, full time, working at the Odeon instead of sort of thinking about college or university in that next stage in my life. And it was whilst I was there that I got really, really bored and was just like, this isn't what it was supposed to be. What can I do? Unfortunately, a job opportunity came up in London, in Camden. And I just thought, you know what? I'm sick, tired. I like this expression. I'm sick of tired of being sick and tired. And it's a Rosa Parks expression. And it was just something that I thought, I'll just apply for it just because I get a day off. My organisation would pay for me to go down to London, and I'd see London for a bit, walk around, excuse me. And on my way down, I thought, I've got to put in the effort. I've got to show willing. So I was starting to do some more research and having a sort of quick scan about what questions they might ask me and that kind of thing. And by the time I got into London, I was like, actually, I was really quite excited about what this possibility could be, what the future could be for me. And I got to Camden, and if you're like me at that point, yes, I might be black, but I didn't necessarily interact with that many black people. Diversity wasn't necessarily big on the agenda. And I got into Camden, and I was greeted by a tall African black man, and I was like, oh my goodness. And the CEO was gay, and it was just like, what is this world? Actually, everyone was just different, and it was so nice and culturally diverse that I was just like, I could do this. I could really fit in here and make a difference. Unfortunately, I got the job, and I was a 17-year-old kid at that point who was moving sort of for the first time away from home. So I lived in Nottingham, I was moving to London, and was just shit scared, if I may, but was just like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to live this, and I'm going to see where it takes me. And the only reason, well, no, and I got there and had a fab time. Really enjoyed my job. I was team leader at the cinema, but it was such a great atmosphere, a great learning experience for me. And I decided that I wanted to become regional manager and that kind of thing in the Odeon cinemas. And the thing that stopped me was my age. So at that time, you couldn't be promoted because you had the legal responsibility of locking up and making sure everyone was safe. And you had to be 21 at that point to sort of take on that responsibility. So I was like, what am I going to do I'd turned 18 by this point, but what am I going to do for the next 3 years so that the people that I'm currently the team leader for don't surpass me in terms of in terms of time. How much more can I learn? So I decided in the August, as you do, that in September I would be going to university. I had no idea what to do, no idea what clearing was at that point, because it had never sort of crossed my mind that university was something for me to do. And like I say, university was the stopgap so that I could go back to London and become a general manager, regional manager, etc. within the Odeon organisation. So I went to Sheffield, Hallam, I must say, not Sheffield University, on the basis that my friend had gone there and done communication studies, which is what I'd done as an A-level and was quite good at. So I decided that Sheffield was close enough to home, being Nottingham, to be far enough away, but far enough away not to feel like home was just there. And that's what I did. I got through, did my course. And it was whilst I was on my course, I was like, I'm not sure that university is what I thought it was going to be. But like I said, I've got to do something for 3 years. And I stuck at it for my first year, did all right. Some subjects were great, some not so much. I really enjoyed the sort of women's studies elements of my communication studies degree. But it wasn't enough to kind of keep me motivated or make me think this is really what I want. And I don't necessarily think I'd even comprehended what getting a degree meant. And I remember a significant turning point was Christmas in year 2. And I come home and I was like, actually, I can finish now if I wanted. I could just quit and say, I tried it. It's not what I thought it was going to be. I'm not enjoying the experience. I'll come away with some debt, but I know that I tried. But I told myself that actually, if I got through my degree, no one's going to ever take that away from me, and I will have earned it. And arguably, I would have had the opportunity to potentially earn more than I would have done had I not. So to pay off that debt that bit quicker. Not quite true, but yeah. So I went back after Christmas and decided I'd already done the same amount of time that I had to come. And I knew that what was coming was going to be harder because I was entering my final year. But I thought, I can do this. And I was lucky that in my 3rd year, we had a talk from the Students' Union. And this isn't supposed to be a kind of plug as such, but it was a talk about undertaking an independent study unit as opposed to doing a dissertation. And the project was called Horizons, and it was working with a group of student volunteers and some younger sort of children at school from an underdeprived area of Sheffield. And these children were brought up into a culture whereby it was normal to fall pregnant at a really early age so that they could secure housing and just be part of that social system, so to speak. They wouldn't necessarily have had any aspirations because their parents before them wouldn't have done that, because they wouldn't have been able to see what was out there. They didn't know what the possibilities were. And that's not being disparaging on these. That was just the life they lived in. So for me to be able to work on that as a project was just eye-opening experience, and trying to encourage these people to think beyond what their life, I want to say expectancy, and I hope you know what I mean by that, but what their life plan was supposed to be, and to get them to think about the positivities of university, obviously whilst ignoring that it wasn't necessarily what I thought it was. I just could see it as Malcolm X said, education is the passport to the future. So perhaps giving these people that opportunity was something that I could do. And I absolutely loved working on that project. That gave me an insight into widening participation that I hadn't had before. And I was able to finish my 3-year course. I got a 2-1 in the end. One of the things that I've written down here was about, we didn't necessarily at that point we didn't use the word Black and minority ethnic at that point. BAME didn't exist, BME didn't exist. It wasn't the language that was spoken. And I'm not talking about that long ago, but what I'm saying is times have changed, and those are the sort of conversations that we're having now. So we didn't even address that there was an issue between being Black and my degree classification, and being white and what that degree classification would have been. And I'm glad in a way, because I'm one of these people that isn't going to be oppressed by society's perception that I should be. I would work my damnedest to be the best that I can be, and society isn't going to tell me that I'm good enough or I'm not good enough. I'm going to be the person that decides that. So that's, again, ultimately where the title of this kind of conversation came from. I was determined not to be a statistic. So I graduated 2-1 Sheffield Hallam. My chancellor, I don't know if you know of him, but was someone that I really respected. He's still the chancellor. He's Professor Robert Winston. I'd watched Child of Our Time. I think he's an amazing guy. And sadly, he wasn't at my graduation, but because I'd become an officer, I was able to see him. I didn't get to meet him, but I was able to see him. And I just think he's an amazing guy. So I became an officer because of the project that I'd been involved in. I ran to be the women's officer, and I had got involved in volunteering in my final year of studies. And I was unsuccessful and I was gutted. It was really close margin, and I was absolutely devastated because I didn't know what I was going to do next. And it just so happened that there was only one person running in the position of Multicultural and International Students Officer, which I'll call MISO from now on. And I thought to myself, I could run for that position and then I could run in the next year to be the women's officer because I really wanted to be the women's officer. And I ran in that election against other people that were thinking very similar things to me. And I got it. And I think on reflection, I shouldn't have made that decision. I describe myself as a woman who is Black and not a Black woman. And the distinction in that is I wake up every day and I know that I'm a woman. The life sort of challenges are presented to me, I know that I'm a woman. Interestingly, I can see myself on video now and I can see my screen. That's how I know that I'm Black. I don't allow being Black to influence decisions that I make. And I forgot to say earlier that whilst I was at school, I was bullied because I was so dark. And that was by Black children. It was really quite shocking that people could look at you in such a way. And one of the things that is really quite personal about this is that my approach to that, or my response to that, was that I used to bathe in bleach and I used to scrub my skin so that I could try and be accepted. And it was at that point that I kind of went, why am I doing this for someone else? Actually, I should be proud of who I am. So that's what it was. I kind of almost quite early in my life disassociated the skin colour with success. And again, that's why I don't necessarily like thinking about a BAME attainment gap, because it's about personalities, it's about strength and what you as an individual bring to the team. So as I said, I ran for Multicultural and International Students Officer. And whilst I was there, I was on a team of 5 exec. And that was a year-long post, as all positions are, unless you stand for a second year. And in that year, I learned so much about leadership and teamwork, finances of the organisation, strategic planning, project management. As ultimately any officer is, it's about representing students and finding out what are important issues to those students, and hopefully those aligning with what it is that's important to you, and you being able to present those to the university and making real change and a real difference for that community that you're part of. So that was great. As the MISO officer, Multicultural and International Students Officer, I again was invited to be part of a fantastic project which was called Choices and Voices. This project looked at year 10 and year 11 BAME students, Black and Asian students in schools in Sheffield. And again, was a sort of similar focus to get them to think about university as an option for them, because quite rightly or wrongly, Black students didn't go to university, Asian students didn't go to university, even a widening participation union such as Sheffield Hallam. And interestingly, the places such as De Montfort, where I went on to work, or Sunderland as a city campus. And that was, again, sort of one of those life-changing experiences. Even though that happened over 20 years ago, I still think about that and use that as an opportunity to talk about the impact, or the positive impact that you can have on someone's life. So after being the Multicultural and International Students Officer, the reason that I stood was to run to be the Women's Officer. The elections time came again, and I didn't get it. So I say to myself that I am the best women's officer at Sheffield Hallam never had. I would have loved to have taken on that opportunity, and I was disappointed, but equally, I think sometimes disappointment is just genuinely about having a passion for something and not being able to give it your all. So disappointment for me isn't something that should be seen as a bad thing. It's just an opportunity to sort of rethink where you're at and kind of go, well, how can I continue to make a difference? So after not getting elected at Sheffield Hallam, I was fortunate to be able to work in a college students' union, and that was a very different experience to anything I'd encountered before. One of the highlights of that trip was the annual trip to Amsterdam, which we organised for the majority of 16 to 18-year-olds. Obviously, being a college students' union, there were lots of people that went. My first year, we took over 100 students to Amsterdam. Fortunately, 100 students came back, so that was a real success. But it was one of those small opportunities that in my first year, it was the first time it made a profit. And so it's just about thinking about the needs of the students, but also balancing that with the needs of the organisation. So after sort of 3.5 years of working in a college, I went back to Sheffield Hallam as a staff member on a fixed term contract. And it was a very, very different experience to being an officer. It was just sitting on the other side and kind of supporting the officers to achieve various things rather than being the person that was making those decisions in the first place. And I enjoyed that. But again, I was living in Nottingham, working in Sheffield, and I just got to a point where I didn't want to commute anymore. So I decided that I was going to hand my notice in, didn't have anything else to do. Not necessarily the wisest of decisions, but didn't have anything to do. But I was just like, I'm tired. I am tired. And it was whilst I was on that break and I got a job working at Nottingham Trent, but for the university, I realised that I preferred student unions more than another job, if that made sense. I prefer seeing the journey that students make. I prefer sort of empowering them and making them believe in themselves more than just having a job. So it was fortunate that there was a job that came up at De Montfort, which again is just swapping Sheffield North for Leicester South. And I was just like, no, do you know what? This is what I want to do. So I was fortunate to become the Democracy and Representation Coordinator at De Montfort Students' Union about 12 years ago. And I've been at De Montfort ever since. And worked my way up from Democracy and Representation Coordinator to a Student Voice Manager to Head of Membership Services. And during that time, I've carved out a different sort of path for me. I've become a mentor because, again, I believe in empowering people, young people, to make a difference. Again, that was a project aimed at sort of BAME individuals that might fall through the cracks, that might need that extra support, that should be flying and shouldn't be hampered by statistics or what it is that people say about them, and for no reason other than being Black. And interestingly, at De Montfort, our Deputy President Education rather, was instrumental a few years ago in terms of setting the anonymous marking agenda and suggesting that actually this was an issue and we needed to look at this from a holistic point of view, rather than suggesting that it was just these people's fault. Perhaps there was something wrong and we could look at working on that. And since then, De Montfort have gone on to decolonising the curriculum, but taking that even further and looking at decolonising the institution and having effective representation of not only just BAME of individuals, but of other cohorts of people, of disabled individuals, of women in engineering and science, and those kind of projects. Not specifically about mentoring or supporting people, but I became a Mandala first responder. And Mandala is the sexual reporting network that De Montfort set up, and that was again about sort of listening to female students primarily that had undergone or currently going through some kind of sexual violence, abuse, and supporting them in terms of what it is that they needed to do. Whilst at De Montfort, Doreen Lawrence, Stephen Lawrence's mum, became the Chancellor of our university, and you kind of think, if she can do it, I can do it. And so it was just really inspiring to kind of say, stop putting barriers up for yourself and start believing in yourself, start living the life that you want, because no one else should be held responsible for your decisions, and no one else should be blamed for your decisions either. So for me, the decision to kind of take the job at Sunderland was one that I did speak to my husband about, obviously, but it was still one of those things that I kind of thought, if this was the other way around, if he'd got a job that was maybe 200 miles away from home, we would make it work. So why couldn't I make it work? Why couldn't I sort of stop having that sort of dichotomy of I need to be a mum and I need to be at home, and home is here. I can be successful somewhere else, and someone else can share that sort of parental responsibility, because society isn't necessarily that mum has to do this. So I was lucky enough to apply for the role at Sunderland after talking myself out of it, really. And I talked myself out of it because of the distance. And I'd said to myself, yes, I want to be a CEO in a students' union, but I don't want that to be at the expense of my family. But like I've said, why shouldn't I? Why shouldn't I, as a woman, be able to say, I can do this and still live the life that other people have? Why can't I do this and still be the mum that I'm supposed to be? So, yeah, that was something that was really important to me. And whilst I've been here at Sunderland for 9 months or so now, it's been really important to sort of try and reach out to the students, because you guys are ultimately, hopefully what I've tried to say is, you're ultimately the thing that inspire me. It's about empowering you to make that decision to sort of have a positive trajectory during your life experience. And many mission statements and student unions are all about enhancing the student experience. But one of the things that we need to get right or be better at is talking to the students about that. So this is, again, like we said, a plea to get involved. And if that's not at officer level, so be it, but get involved, because your students' union hopefully can have such an impact on your life as it did with me. I kind of spoke about having 2 children, and this is really personal. And again, one of those sort of issues about being a woman. So family and friends close to me will know that I wanted to be a mum for such a long time. I said that I needed to have kids before I was 30. I needed to tick this off, tick, tick, tick. And we get to this, I don't know why we do it, or is it a societal expectation that we have to do things by a certain time? And I fell pregnant before I was 30, and sadly we had a miscarriage. And I fell pregnant a second time, and we had a miscarriage. And that happened in total 7 times. And each time it breaks you. And I'm not sort of sweeping this under the carpet. I'm saying it because it's true, and it means something to me. And again, it used to challenge me as a woman. I was like, actually, as a woman, there is one thing that I am supposed to do as a woman, and that's procreate and have children. And I got to a point in my life where I thought, this isn't going to happen. What does that mean? And again, that's a barrier that I've put in my own life. No one else has put that in there. But fortunately, myself and my husband had the resilience and the family support to be able to continue. And 2 of those miscarriages were sort of fairly late into the pregnancy, so at 18 weeks and at 20 weeks. And they were just devastating for me. But I was able to kind of say, okay, what you need is that one go to make it work for you. Just one go. How many times are you prepared to try and get that one successful attempt? And I have 2 children, and fortunately you can't hear them now, but they're screaming in the background. And actually, I wouldn't have it any other way. My life has been so much more enriched by having those individuals in my life, that whilst I was going through that pain and that agony, potentially there was something that was driving me to succeed and driving me to make the best of my life. And arguably, and I know that this doesn't necessarily happen for everyone, and there's a decision at which you kind of say, this has broken me too much, I can't continue. But that's your choice, and you have the ability to change your life. And in some cases we don't. Like with my miscarriages, I went to a hospital once and I was like, we are so advanced in terms of technology, why can't you do something for me now? I am in the process of losing. I won't go into too much detail, I'm sorry, I didn't give a trigger warning beforehand. But I'm in the process of losing, and we're in this society in the UK in 2016 or whatever year it was. Why can't we do something? This is not the back of beyond. This is not like middle century England. We can do something about this, and we can't. And actually, the resilience that I'm trying to sort of say is in you. It's about finding that strength and finding whatever is your passion. I think I'm really fortunate to be able to, I love a good quote, but I'm able to sort of draw a line under each day and kind of potentially focus on the positives that the next day can bring. And that's what I do in my work context. I love working in a students' union. I love the challenges that students bring, because ultimately it's about enhancing your experiences, and it's about you challenging me, challenging the students' union, challenging the university, challenging yourselves to be better versions of yourself. And I'm opening up my heart to you because I want you to be involved in that journey. I want us to collectively figure out what's best for Sunderland Students' Union, figure out how we can make the university listen to us. And we're really fortunate that they do. I'm fortunate as well that I know Abby Moriarty, who's the Pro Vice Chancellor for Teaching and Learning. I worked with her at De Montfort. And we have a relationship whereby I can say, this isn't working, and she can say, that isn't working, and we can just have that conversation. But what I need is to be validated by students. I need students to tell us what it is that they want. So I kind of done a whistle-stop tour of how I got to Sunderland. I haven't really spoken about Sunderland or beyond, but I think I will sort of pass on to questions if that's all right.
Thank you, Colina. It's really insightful to kind of hear, I think, you know, for me in particular, and I'm sure anybody in the SU that's here as well, kind of that journey that you have gone on. Because like I say, we're quite thankful to have you now as our CEO. And
I just say I didn't pay him to say that. I didn't pay him to say that. He's not getting any extra money for that comment, but thank you.
And obviously with that comes a culture change, and definitely what you've kind of talked about your experiences and the way that you've kind of coped and you've looked at disappointment. You're definitely kind of putting that to our culture as an SU. Does Sean ask the question, which was, what side of uni did you necessarily not enjoy, or what was it that you thought it would be?
I think I went to university thinking that you could just do your own thing. I think I thought that from a very early stage, and that's only ultimately when you get to your third year and you're writing your dissertation is when you can do your own thing. So in my head, as I said, I was quite interested in women's studies, and I had this question in my head that I wanted to answer, which was, all men have guns, discuss, kind of thing. And I wanted to go into uni and kind of suggest that it was that kind of penis equals power type situation. I wanted to say, I see Paula laughing there, and what that meant in terms of a society, and what that power meant in terms of a rape culture. And I wanted to go in as a first year student and research that and present that as an essay. And that's what I thought uni was about, because people have always said, oh, you're intellectually stimulated and you can have these own thoughts, etc. But that wasn't necessarily the case, because again, even if I was able to sort of think about that question, I wouldn't have been able to just think about that question. It has to be framed in an academic sense, and it had to be related to my course, and it wouldn't necessarily been that related to my course. I think one of the other things was that I continued to work in Nottingham whilst I was studying. So I worked at weekends. So I missed that kind of social element of university life. And I don't know how influential that would have been. I don't necessarily have any friends that went to uni that I'm friends with now, whereas I know a lot of people would have that, and I think that's something I missed. So yeah, when they were all going out, I wasn't necessarily engaging in that. I think some of the lectures, and I think you guys will say it now, some of the lectures are just shocking, and you're like, why am I paying this much money for this? Whereas some of them are great, but it's that kind of life experience balance, and actually everything is like that. You have that kind of good stuff and bad stuff, and you have to take out of it what you put in. But equally, I guess some people would hate the subjects that I really excelled in and think that they weren't that good. So it was just, I don't know if it was tailored enough for what I thought it was going to be, if that's an all right answer.
Thanks, Colina. If you do have questions, just pop them into the chat and we'll kind of go through them. But if you do want to speak, just to advise that this is being recorded, just because we want to edit it and we want to kind of put it online as well. So just to let you know, if you do plan to speak, it will be recorded, but we can take things out if needed. But definitely use the chat. I'm just going to go in order of questions, but Georgia just asked, how do you find the resilience inside of you when faced with such tough life events? And just to extend on that, because this question I had was, you did talk about that disappointment and passion when you want something that's kind of a driver. But it was, again, just those coping mechanisms, and, you know, through your kind of career, through all the events, have they remained the same or have you changed them?
Bear with me. Resilience. How did I find my resilience and disappointment and passion? Well, I think, I don't know how I found my resilience, in fairness. I remember a colleague of mine saying, "You're the strongest woman I know." And there's a quote that's about when strength is it's not a choice, it's the only other thing that you have. So for me, it's about getting up and dusting myself down and carrying on, because the world just doesn't stop when you've had a bad day. I said I love a good quote, but there's a quote about your track record of getting through bad days is 100%. And I'll say that to you now. Actually, you don't even realize that you're having a bad day or that you will get through it. And I think that sometimes it was that. I remember, like I said, it's very personal times, crying a lot, and just sort of telling myself who I am and telling myself. There's another quote about sort of straightening your crown and remembering who you are, and that's what I do. I kind of have an invisible crown. I am the queen of my life. I am the narrator in my life. I will make my life what it is that I need it to be. And yes, I'm not suggesting that it doesn't hurt at all. But I think one of the other interesting things about life is that no one else necessarily knows what you're going through. And I remember, sorry, I'm going to be really personal, and this is a trigger moment. I remember being at work one afternoon, being pregnant. I hadn't necessarily told anyone at that time I was pregnant. And I just started to experience the burning sensation in my stomach. And I was like, I think I know what this is. And I said, I'm really sorry, I'm going to have to go home. I'll talk to you when I'm in a position to talk to you. And I got on the train and I was just ringing my boyfriend at the time, now my husband, and just saying, I think things are hard. And I got off the train, I was walking through the sort of up to Nottingham station, and no word of a lie, the person from a charity that wanted to talk to me was from Save the Children. And I just remember that because of the irony of that situation. I was like, I can't save those children when literally what I'm going through myself is so tough. I use pain as a way to support other people. I have no problems sharing that story with you, and I have no problems having one-to-one conversations with people that have gone through similar, the same, or very different experiences. I will sit down and talk to people about that, because I sometimes think that you don't realize the power in what it is that you're going through can help someone else in a very different way. So I have no qualms about my hurt being used to support someone else through something that they're going through. And that's what I try and sort of base my life on. Actually, it hurts you now, but it could support other people in the future. So in terms of disappointment and passion, I think the two of them go hand in hand, actually. It's with elections, for example, when I ran and I wasn't successful twice. I don't know why. They're just stupid students at Sheffield Hallam, obviously. But I ran twice and was unsuccessful. And the reason I was disappointed is because I wanted it so much. I think if you're not disappointed, it means you didn't want it as much as maybe you should have done. So, it's not necessarily a bad thing to be disappointed. I think it just kind of shows that you want something. And I think there are other ways of getting what that is. Sometimes there's that expression again, another quote, when one door closes, another one opens. And that's so true. Actually, just before getting this job, as the chief exec at Sunderland, I went for a job in Nottingham that I thought was my dream job. It was going to be director of student influence as a senior manager at the University of Nottingham, which is a prestigious university. And I got down to the last three and I did everything that I could and I didn't get it and I was gutted. I was only gutted for the day because that's all I will allow myself to be gutted for, because I have to move on. But had I got that job, I wouldn't be talking to you now, because that is just the way life is. So disappointment is part of the whole learning experience. It's like failure is not the opposite of success. Failure is part of success. And that's how I kind of plan my life, that you have to sort of, you experience the highs because you know what the lows are, and the highs are even higher once you've gone through something really bad. And I kind of would bring my children in, and I'm happy that they come and scream at people that I'm talking to. I mean, the Vice Chancellor knows my children because they've come in, and I'm not sort of sorry about that. So does that answer both questions?
If anybody wants to extend on that, then please in again, just in the chat or speak up. We've had a couple of things come through. One of them was about your biggest regret, and this was about Paul had mentioned find it hard sometimes to say no to opportunities, and so how do you assess the opportunities that you want to actually go for and decide on the next one?
Paula, that's a really personal question. I do have a regret that I'm not going to share with you because it's just too bad. But arguably, I taught myself very early on that you should not regret what you do, only what you don't. And yes, there is an opportunity for us to say, I wish I had done this, but there is a reason that you didn't necessarily do that at the time. And that might be a financial reason, a resource implication, anything. So I don't regret anything really, because each of the things that you do or do not do were right at the time. And in terms of not having an opportunity, it's because you did something else. It's because life took you in a different way. So in terms of saying no to things, sometimes for me, the time to say no is when you really don't have any more capacity to give. I will say yes to as many things as I can, because you never know what that's going to sort of bring. Turning left instead of right, well, arguably my life would have been completely different had I not done this particular thing. But equally, I'm happy with the way that my life is. So how do I assess opportunities? I don't necessarily. I just kind of think of the immediate benefit and let's just do it and see what it brings. I'm one of these suck it and see kind of people, and actually something will happen that's positive out of that. And if it's not, you still learn from that. So everything that you do in life teaches you something. So my biggest regret in life, like I say, I'm not really going to say that. It's about love and being hurt and not following that. What would happen if I had have said yes to that guy instead? But my children wouldn't be here. So that's what we have to say. Yeah, I hope that answers. Go for it. Only when you can't physically do something should you say no, in my opinion. And I do say, my presidents will know I say this, and my staff will know I say this. There are opportunities. When you say yes to everything, you're ultimately saying no to something. So be mindful of how much you can give before you say yes to something. I'm doing a course now that is the worst course ever. It's charity law and governance, and I thought it would be really useful to do as a CEO. I absolutely hate it, but equally I've met some great people on the course, and I'm going to hopefully pass the course and stick with it, because it will teach me something that I didn't know. That was information that I didn't have before, but it's not necessarily the greatest thing. I'll be able to put the course down on my CV, she says, hopefully once again. But it's not necessarily something that's driving me. I'm not passionate about that, but it's the other things that presents, the secondary or byproducts of that. Yeah.
And then we've had a question from Mohammed as well, which is a bit of a lengthy one, so I'm going to just try and read it word for word. So, how did you know what you wanted to do as a job?
I'll stop you there. I didn't, and that's one of those things about opportunities. My career was never carved. I think at school, I remember saying to my grandma, I wanted to be a lawyer, I wanted to be a teacher, I wanted to be a doctor, all sorts of things. And I think I probably disappointed her, because I say I'm a CEO and she's like, I don't even know what that is. So I didn't, to answer that first point.
And I think in some ways it answers the next bit as well, because it was saying, when you mentioned about being a regional manager we're going to be a regional manager for Odeon, but university changed that. So what I'm trying to say is, how did you decide? But I think that's been answered.
Yeah, life kind of happened for me. I think I wanted to be a regional manager at the Odeon because I was really passionate about it, and it's fanatical about film, passionate about people. Is their tagline, was their tagline back when I started to work for them, but it shows that it meant a lot to me because I still remember that tagline. So what changed was I changed rather than that as a decision. I kind of thought I could be more, and going to university showed that I could be more. I developed something else that I was passionate about, that I was probably more passionate about. And it's sort of following your heart. Nothing is carved in stone, and there is no right or wrong answer in your life. And I think that's sometimes what people have to learn. There is no right or wrong answer in your life. It's a learning experience, and it will teach you something. And even the bad experiences in life, as I have touched on, kind of help shape you. They have made me a stronger person. They have made me appreciate my children more, appreciate family more. So there is no right or wrong answer in life. It's just an answer, and it was just what was right at the time. So don't beat yourself up over deciding. And actually, in terms of careers now, I think if you think back, I don't know, 30, 40 years ago, people were in jobs for life. That's not the case anymore. People reinvent themselves regularly. And so why should you just kind of say that today you're really passionate about something, in 5, 10 years time, that might change completely. So I imagine quite a few students at the minute are somewhat worried about employment after university. I think the context of COVID changes that, because yes, there is a real concern about jobs and the job market. But I think that those people that work hard, that try hard, will succeed. I remember thinking about being made redundant a few years ago. It's a concern, but I am of that sort of mindset that I will work to my best to kind of ensure that I am in something. It might not be the thing that I want it to be, but I'm in something. I can still have a roof over my head. I can still sort of pay those bills and continue to find something that I want. So that is a bit more different, or that is more different now. So good question, Mohammed, because what I will say, that's why you should get involved in your students' union, because that's the sort of thing that will give you those opportunities. Those things that I've spoken about, the Choices and Voices Conference, the Horizons Conference, those are things that you can articulate in an interview that might make you stand out. So that wasn't planted, but thanks.
Planted questions? Never. So Anna has asked, what is the best part of working in the SU? And just following that one, Frank has put, regarding you being a fresh CEO at Sunderland, how do you see Sunderland SU's vision, and what would you like to achieve from the role? So I think there's a bit of a roll on them together.
That's the best part. The best part of working in the students' union is the student development. Now, I often say there's a starting point, and everyone assumes that people all start at this point, but there are some people that start here. And for me, it's about getting the people that start here to here, not even here necessarily. It's about making that a positive trajectory. It's about sort of seeing a person potentially as a first year, seeing them as a third year, seeing them as a postgraduate student, or whatever it is that they decide to do. And I've been fortunate enough that I've been able to generate relationships or develop relationships with people that have come back and told me what they are doing. I remember the president of the Chess Society is now a doctor, and it's amazing. It's just like, oh my God, I wish I'd studied. I wish I'd done my PhD, because I could say I was a doctor too. I'm not, but I actually really like sort of the student empowerment, working with students, developing their confidence. It's not all about sort of being introverted and turning those into extroverts, but it's about supporting that journey. It's about ensuring that university gives them the best time that they can have. And I think one of the difficulties is that we don't have enough students engaging in the students' union in the first place. So trying to reach out to these people, just kind of go, we are here for you. And it's made a huge difference in my life. And I'm not suggesting it will make the same difference in yours, but it could. So that's that. So what was Frank's question about? How do I see the SU, and what is my vision for it? What would I like to achieve in my role? I think when I spoke to people when I first arrived, so when I first got to Sunderland, I said to people I wanted sort of 15 minutes with them just to talk through who I am, talk through who they are. And a lot of people asked me that question, what is my vision for the Students' Union? And I said, one of the interesting things about my vision for the Students' Union is it has to be dependent on what other people want. So I can come in and say, actually, we should have sport, which I do believe we should. Actually, we should be running this and we should be running that. But arguably, I couldn't say that from the position that I was in. I needed to know what your history was in order to know how to move forward. So I'm not sure if you are aware, but the Students' Union haven't actually organised their own Freshers' Fair yet. And that, to me, at De Montfort, is completely baffling. Freshers' Fair was always organised by the Students' Union. So we have to almost go backwards before I can say this is what I want to achieve. So yes, I want sport, and I want the radio station, and I want commercial services, and I want us, I guess, again, strategically, someone in the trustee board said, oh, we could be one of the top, let's say 25, because we're not going to be top 10. Without putting a dampener on myself, we're not going to be top 10. We could be one of the top 25 student unions in the country. I'm like, what does the number matter? Actually, what we need to do is be the best students' union for our students. Forget what students at Oxford are doing. Forget what students at Teesside or Durham or Sheffield or whatever. We need to be the best for our students. And the way we do that is by talking to our students and taking them on the journey and embedding their vision as part of this collective vision. What would I like to achieve in my role? Very much that. I remember making a video really early on and saying one of the things that would make me really happy is to be walking on campus and for a student to say, hi, Colina, how are you? And that would just make my day, because it's like, how do you know who I am? Because sadly, I don't know your name. But for people to kind of say, yes, I heard you say this, or I saw you do this, actually I want that to be a sort of a holistic experience and for us to all take the Students' Union forward. So I'd like to achieve that. Another thing I want to achieve in my role that I'm hoping to do, and you kind of touched on the cultural changes, is one of the things that I believe in is that your staff are an amazing asset. And I think that people talk about, oh, what if that staff member leaves? That's good. If that staff member leaves to get a better job, I have done a good job. So I believe in empowering people. Their success is my success, and that's what I want to do. I want to have an empowering and supportive culture whereby students, staff, colleagues, yourself just challenge each other, challenge me, challenge the institution, and do it in a positive way. And that's what I want to be the kind of mantra for the Students' Union. Together, everyone achieves more, in a kind of cheesy sort of way.
Monica's asked a question, and then Paula wanted to come in afterwards. So just with Monica's, it was when you applied for any job and going through the essential person specification and looking at that, and you haven't been quite 100%. Do you pull back, or do you continue with that application? What kind of barriers do you kind of overcome with these applications?
So that's a really interesting question. I was talking to my friend about this last night. I think, and just think about this, if you're applying for a job and you can do 100% of the things on that job, where is the stretch in that job? That is not the job for you. If you can already do 100% of the things in that job, you should already be doing that job. So, and I'm speaking to Monica as a woman, we do this. We are stereotypically known for doing this. We see we can do 8 of the 10 things and we're like, shouldn't apply for that job. And no disrespect to the guys out there, they'll say, I can do 6 of the 10 things, I'm going to apply for it and I'm just going to blag the rest. Yeah, so just think of what you can do. And perhaps when it comes to, I can't do that, you don't obviously say it that way. You kind of say, these are the ways I'm going to achieve that. Actually, this job is going to help me learn how to do that thing the way you want me to do it. So don't. Like I said, the only person that should stop you is you. Yeah, obviously, when you get into an interview and it's not right for you, that's a different matter entirely. But what I say when I come out of interviews is their loss. And that's the way that I look at my life. It's their loss. Actually, I'm going to go somewhere and I'm going to be magic. And I can say to the CEO at Nottingham, who's part of my Action Learning Set, ironically, I'm achieving. And he knows that I'm achieving. And he would have been able to support me in different ways than this job could do. But actually, me not getting the job at Nottingham has not affected me. Yes, I was sad for the day. Go for it. Did you pull back, lower some personality knowledge, like language barriers? Fortunately, I've only ever applied for jobs in which English is the language, so I don't.
It's okay, no problem. It's no problem.
I don't necessarily have that as an issue in terms of applying for other jobs. But sometimes there is that whole thing that if you have to change who you are to get through an interview, then you shouldn't be doing that job either, because your authentic self isn't going to be who they want or what they want. So the job is there for you. It might take you a bit longer to find it, or it might take them a bit longer to see it. It's how you sell yourself. And so sometimes those quirky things are the things that you remember. So don't. If you can do a job 100%, I'm telling you that's not the job for you.
Some great advice there. Paula, did you want to come in and ask a question?
Yes, please, because it's easier for me than trying to type. Right, Colina, I can relate to you on so many levels. I mean, I had my children early and I lived in Germany for many, many years, and, you know, different cultures and all. And I have changed jobs, God knows how many times. I've got experience all over the place, from DIY stores to, you know, retail, everything I've had to go at. And I think, and I faced quite a few barriers with my arm years ago because it wasn't accepted, etc. And I've just gone, excuse my fingers, I've just gone, nah. And, you know, people say, oh, you can't do something. And this is where I totally back you on this. I mean, there's only two things I can't do in life. I can't do a handstand and I can't pick my nose with my left arm. But after that, if I can find a way, if I've got to go roundabout to do something, I will. Have you had to do that somewhere in like your career? I mean, I head out and I mean, like going to uni now, yeah, I'm a very, very mature student, 53, doing performing arts with all, the youngsters are very bendy and can do everything. That's not where I'm heading. I'm heading that I'm passionate. I've done council jobs, as councillors, and getting us on the map. That's what I'm passionate about, disabled arts, getting onto the map with that, and it's what you know and who you know as well. I find makes such a difference. And the amount of people that, I don't know if with your job, that you've met, that you can say, if I need some information, I can always gather it from different sources. Have you found that very useful? Because I have in my own life.
Yeah. Was your first question about how I had to kind of almost circumnavigate something to get somewhere? Possibly, but I probably wouldn't have defined it like that, because if it was a barrier, I just went a different way. It wouldn't have stopped me, if that made sense.
Yeah.
And that's why I often say I'm a woman who is Black. I never suggest that being either of those things is going to stop me in something. So it's just, I guess, the mindset that I wouldn't necessarily have seen that as a potential barrier. I'd have just gone, okay, let's try this way. So, for example, I'll ask a question in a different way. If it's a question and answer thing, can we have some money for this? No. Well, I can't do this, this, or this if I don't have resource to be able, and you won't ask that in the same conversation, don't get me wrong, but there's a different way of getting around it, or you try and find out what someone else's priorities are, someone else's agenda. And I'm not political in that sense at all. I don't like game playing. I can't stand, oh yeah, well, if we say yes to this, they might say yes to that, and then both of us can say yes to this. I can't stand it. I don't have the time for it. I don't have the energy for it. So I will go in and say, what is it that you want? This is what we want. How can we work together? Done. So I'm fortunate that now I'm in a position where I can have that level of approach to particular things, but arguably I could have probably done that at a lower level than I am now. I could have done that as a senior manager, just with senior managers. Obviously, the ultimate decision isn't necessarily mine at that point. So I might have circumnavigated or gone around things in a different way, but I guess it's not a quote as such, and I think there is a quote. It's about a river will still find its source. It might have to meander to get there, but it will still get there in the end.
I like
that. For me, it's, you're going to get there. It just might take you that bit longer. And I congratulate you and applaud you for being an older student and enjoying it down with the kids. I think, again, one of the things about working in the student union, probably one of the worst things about working in the student union, in fairness, is that the cohort of students continues to be 18, generally speaking, and I just get older and I have to sit at the older people's table, and every year I'm on a different table to them. And you're like, I used to be on that table. I used to know what it was like to be young. And then I bend down to pick something up and my back goes and everyone's like, oh, come on, grandma. But hey, yeah.
It's very cool being a grandma. I'm 53.
I'm not a grandma yet.
I am.
Become a mum. No, I can imagine.
When you've got, it's fabulous. And yeah, it is. I get the kids going, well, we're on WhatsApp, and I'm like, can't we just have it on Facebook? Because I can't do WhatsApp. They think it's highly hilarious. But yeah, thank you for answering that question. That was very good. Cheers.
You're welcome.
Sorry, I was just half listening to my child saying, can we watch this, while trying to get chat up. I was just looking at what Jenny wrote there, sorry.
Jenny's never been at the table because she's too old or too young. It's quite sad when you're young and you're on that table, you look at them and you go, oh my gosh. And then you don't realise that you're getting onto that table, and it's like only years later that you go, oh, we used to be on that table. Where are the cool kids gone? So we're not cool kids anymore.
I mean, speak for yourself.
Fair enough, yeah.
I'll be a cool older auntie.
Cool.
We're at 4:30. This is scheduled till 4:30. But has anybody got any other questions for Colina? Nothing's kind of popped up in chat.
I have one if no one else does. So I just want to say that Colina is one of the greatest people I've ever met, and I'm not saying it because she's here or because she's my boss or manager, but because she's very supportive to all the staff, and she's there for us whenever we need to tell her something, or whenever we need some advice, like the question Monica asked. We ask similar questions and she's always answering. So I have a question for you, Colina. Who is your role model and why?
I have 3 role models, and this is usually the answer the way I present them. So firstly, there is the suffragette movement. So I kind of go Emmeline Pankhurst as the sort of centre person for that, but Emily Davison, the one that was trampled by the horse, in order to give women the vote. And that is what is really important, that actually, again, I am a woman, and previously I'm lucky that I was never sort of in that position to experience that level of oppression. And then you might go, oh, okay, she's going to go Martin Luther King. I'm not really going to go Martin Luther King. I'm going to go Rosa Parks. Rosa Parks, I have a T-shirt, I didn't wear it today, and it just says, nah, Rosa Parks 1955. And that was just about being sick and tired of society telling you what you can and can't do. You get up because I have to sit there because I'm more important than you. Rosa just kind of went, forget that, no, you're not going to do that. I'm going to sit here, and I'm not necessarily intentionally starting a movement, but I'm going to say that I have a voice, and my voice is as important as yours, and I want you to listen to it. So Emmeline Pankhurst, Emily Davison, the suffragette movement, firstly, Rosa Parks, and again, that was she did that as a sort of black woman. So when it comes to voting, I remember those people, and now I'm really disenfranchised with voting at the minute, because I think that you don't necessarily know who you're voting for, and even when you do vote for people, they don't necessarily deliver on what they say they're going to do. It seems that politicians can lie about things such as £350 million printed on a bus behind you, then you're suddenly saying, oh, we didn't say that. Yes, you did. There's a photograph with you next to a bus, and you can't necessarily do anything about that. And so one of the things that I say to people is go out and vote. And I, again, not necessarily intended, but vote in these elections, because it does make a difference. The people that kind of say it doesn't make a difference, well, actually, if all of you voted collectively, it would make a difference. Like I say, the difficulty is what you're voting for at the minute, but that's an aside. But those 2 groups of people, women and black people, African Americans, BAME, whatever you want to call that collective of group, have meant that I've been in a position to be able to go out and use my democratic voice. But the person that inspires me the most, and this is the cheesy answer, is just my mum. My mum started from a really poor position. I remember, and she probably hate me saying this, but there used to be times that we used to hide from the electricity man that used to knock on the door because she didn't have enough money to pay him. And it was about paying him or feeding me. And so we'd hide. And to go from where she is to getting her diploma later on in life, to seeing her graduate, to doing all that sort of stuff, has just been inspiring for me. And everything I do is with her at the sort of core of that, because she inspires me to be a better person. Thank you.
Get back to my screen properly. So there's one question which rolls off, I think, from your Rosa Parks sentence there as well. So positive change is sometimes really hard to get introduced in university culture, particularly when what we want to achieve as a community is not on the university's agenda, and probably more broadly with higher education agenda. So how can we overcome this? Maybe what can we do
to introduce change?
Yeah, so how can we overcome like the issues when it's not embedded in university culture?
I'm going to go political. I'm going to go deep. About 200 years ago, slavery was a thing. Yep. And I could just finish there if I wanted. 200 years ago, slavery was a thing. It's not a thing anymore, because actually people campaigned against it. There were allies that kind of supported the fact that it wasn't right. There isn't this kind of race superiority, and the only race that should be important is the human race collectively and what we do about that. So about sort of changing things, actually, yes, people in that kind of context have died. In the kind of context that I gave in terms of the suffragette movement, people have died to get us there. Now, I'm not saying that at the university, if we want anonymous marking, someone has to kind of chain themselves to Sir David Bell's kind of car and just say, I'm not moving until something happens. But sometimes it's about having an authentic voice and having enough people behind something to make people realize it's true, or to kind of give a lived experience of what it means to individual people. It's about having the strength and the conviction to see something through. It's believing in it yourself and inspiring others to believe in it and kind of carrying on that sort of journey alongside you. So sometimes I think people automatically go for a red button. You literally go and kind of go, I'm going to have to go to war with you on this. And like I kind of said earlier, sometimes I'm quite naive and just say, this is what I want to achieve. What are the obstacles? And having that conversation on a personal level with those people that might be oppressors, I guess is the word, but in opposition to, is really useful. And one of the things that we say to our presidents is when you go to a meeting, I don't say this, you probably say this to them, but what I used to say to presidents is when you go to a meeting, what you need to do is build those relationships outside of that meeting so that you know who your allies are, so that you can actually speak to someone before a meeting and say, this is what I'm going to present. And when we used to sit next to people without this COVID thing, you could go, I'm going to sit next to my allies because actually that strengthens my position when I talk about this particular thing. And just because they're your allies on one issue doesn't necessarily mean they have to be your allies on another issue, but it just kind of gives you that validity that you know that what you're trying to achieve is right and correct. And like I say, if you've got the students backing you on a particular thing, that kind of helps. Just why does it make a difference? And actually don't be caught up by the difficulties, because sometimes, especially in universities, things can take a long time to change, and we're lucky in student unions that we can probably change things a lot more quickly than that. We still have committees and structures and things like that to go through, but it's definitely easier to change things in a student union context than it is to change things at a university level. But that doesn't mean that change won't happen. Like I said, 200 odd years ago we used to have slaves. We don't anymore because people said it was wrong.
Just one thing from Monica is she wanted to know your 5 top or your 5 Clifton strengths.
Do I remember them?
So I don't know if you do want to share them or not, but
Yeah, no,
that was from Monica.
Let's see if I remember them. Positivity, woo, communication, arranger, and one more thing. I don't know. I will come back to you with those. If there is another question, I will find the answer out. And I think that they're true. I kind of said, I argued with arranger, which was, to me, it's about arranging things and being quite organised, and I'm not necessarily very organised. And I was arguing with that point whilst I was sorting out Christmas cards and birthday presents for future months. So I went, yeah, actually, you are the arranger. So, yeah.
No, yeah, you tried that with me, and I was just like, well, quite the opposite. Is there any other questions from anyone? Because I've got one question to ask, but I'll let anybody else go first.
Looks like it's you, Adam.
10 seconds of silence. I get to ask this question. This will be the last one then. So you talked quite a bit about kind of the way that you think about a day and then tomorrow. So what is next? What is your tomorrow? What is next for you?
For me, finishing that really boring course, charity law and governance. And interestingly, a couple of weeks ago, I had a dream about a PhD, and I did all right in my dissertation. As I said, I did an independent study unit whilst I was at university the first time round and my bachelor's degree. So I never wrote a dissertation until I came to my master's. That was some years later. I graduated from that in January, not January, just gone, the one before, where I could physically go. And that was a very nice experience. So yeah, in my dissertation, I did really well, and I didn't expect to do as well as I did. I got 83%, and in that course, I'd failed a module. So it took me sort of 5 years because I had 2 children in there. But in that course, I'd failed a unit, and so that automatically took me to the 50%. And I was just like, oh, I just want to pass this now. I just need to pass. So I had no expectations that I would ever get the dissertation that I did, but the distinction I did, but my dissertation got me to that mark, and I was just over the moon with that. And so someone said, well, you're halfway there towards your MPhil. Why don't you think about doing a PhD? And I was like, I am not academic in the slightest. I have no idea how I managed to get that. But I had a dream about my PhD, and the question was so clear that I wrote it down when I woke up. And that's something that I might consider doing. So I don't know why, because I don't want to teach necessarily, but then again, I kind of think that teaching isn't necessarily what a PhD is for. A PhD is to sort of prove your level of research or academic ability in that sort of area. So that's possibly it. So that's for me personally. 10 years time, I'm looking at that question because that's still sort of future driven. Still working within the student movement, but potentially in a bigger students' union. And I say in a bigger students' union, not necessarily Sunderland. I think that Sunderland has the potential to be a lot bigger in 10 years based on what it is that we do now. For me, it's about geography and possibly not seeing myself in the Northeast at that point. That's the only reason I wouldn't necessarily want to be there. And I think 10 years is probably long enough for you not to be tainted by something, but for you to kind of say someone else has got to have this vision, someone else is going to take it in a different direction. So a bigger students' union, I kind of would like to be in a bigger students' union in 10 years' time with that sort of level of experience behind me and the confidence to sort of step in and not have to, if you know or not know, go through a restructure and just be able to sort of believe in people and support people. So still in the students' union, sadly, but that's because I love them.
Amazing, thanks for that. Is there any final questions? Because we appreciate all your time. It's gone over a little bit longer, but I hope as much as, I found it valuable. Again, I've heard this a few times, I've come to these stories a few times, because one thing Colina does tell us a lot is that she likes to tell a story. She likes to talk about herself, but I think, it's inspiring each time. So that's the useful part of it, until we will tell her to, shut up in about a couple of years. But if there's anything else, obviously, this isn't the last conversation that you can have with Colina. I think one of the things that she mentioned there was the idea of, if you see her on campus, then please say hello when we're allowed on campus. But I think the other part is, Colina, as well, that your email address is available, your kind of contact is there. So if anybody wants to chat with Colina, then there's an open invite. You haven't even asked this, but I'm saying it's an open invite. Then please do. And obviously, any opportunities, please get involved in. As I mentioned at the beginning, it is elections. It's a prime example of an opportunity that you can get involved in, which will have massive effect, not just on yourself, but on the students that you will represent. But if it's not for you, then please just get involved in something else: a society, course rep, school coordinator, well-being, anything like that. Democracy, union council, I should tell the area that I do, shouldn't I? Really has been really important. But please do have a look at our website, have a look at the opportunities. Sorry about my lighting. I've tried to change it, but it's made it worse.
I have to say, I bought a webcam specifically for this meeting and it hasn't come on. It was in the last meeting it was on, and this meeting it's not. So I understand about the lighting issues too. So yeah, I'm going to send it back now.
But yeah, if there's anything at all, have a look at our website, get in touch with us, get in touch with Colina, or Dr. Colina in the future it might be. But thank you so much for coming along. If there's anything at all, then please get in touch with your SU. We'd love to hear from you, and thanks so much for your time.
Thank you for listening.
Bye.
Thank you. Take care. Thank you all for being here. It's been a real pleasure.